Hi, I'm Matthew Buzzy, and this is Tom Brandt from the PC Mag hardware team, and we both received the new Apple MacBooks. We've seen many iterations of these over the years. You know them well, you love them. But the star of the show is not the exterior upgrades this time. It is Apple's new M1 processor. They've ditched the Intel solution for their newest laptops, and we've both been able to review them, run some benchmarks. Tom, take it away. Tell us about the M1.
Yeah, so the most significant change to Apple's Mac lineup in years is the fact that they've decided to put their own silicon, their own processor into not only the MacBook Air and the new MacBook Pro, but also their small desktop, the Mac Mini. And with the M1 processor, you not only get 4 high-performance computing cores, but you also get 4 efficiency computing cores, which means that the computers can automatically transfer the tasks that you're doing, the workflows that you're doing, to the most efficient cores of the processor that it can, creating both better performance and really, really long battery life for those 2 laptops.
Yeah, and not only are all these cores on this new chip all for CPU tasks, but they also have the GPU cores on the same system on chip. So everything is being done on the same chip, this M1 solution, sort of a all-in-one approach meant to be synergistic with both Apple's hardware, the physical MacBook or the Mac Mini itself, and of course, Mac OS software. The operating system also getting an update with Big Sur. These have all come together in these new three at once new systems, which is a pretty big deal in Mac world. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. We saw some crazy battery life. We saw some really good overall performance and also some encouraging graphics performance out of really all 3 of these systems. They're pretty close in performance, which is good news for the MacBook Air, as the one that has always lagged behind. It has caught up now to the others. But let's start with the MacBook Pro, sort of one of everyone's really favorite laptops.
Well, right. And not only has the MacBook Pro been everyone's favorite laptop, but we've usually, at least in the recent past, recommended the MacBook Pro over the MacBook Air for most people because the price is not that much different. It's $1,000 starting price for the MacBook Air versus $1,300 starting price for the MacBook Pro. And in the past, you got a ton more performance. The older MacBook Airs just were not that powerful for anything other than opening your news in the morning in a single browser tab. Anything more than that, the MacBook Air kind of struggled a bit. Now, both of these laptops have the option for the same M1 processor, virtually the same. There's some slight differences with the MacBook Air, the most significant of which being that the MacBook Air does not have an active cooling fan. So the processor cannot run as quickly for as long a time as it can in the MacBook Pro. But really, I think that the MacBook Pro is now kind of playing a backup role, if you will, to the MacBook Air, and the Pro is really only for people that might like the Touch Bar, which is the only it's the only touch capability that Apple offers in their notebooks, and who also might take advantage of that slight bump there from an active cooling fan. Right.
Yeah. As you're saying, the equation is kind of flipped, completely inverted now. That the MacBook Air, given that the performance is roughly equal, at $999 of a starting price, really an appealing proposition. The MacBook Pro, like you said, you're kind of going for that Touch Bar. You're going for the little bit more performance thanks to the additional cooling, but the fanless MacBook Pro, as thin and light and portable as it is, getting near as good performance at $1,000. I mean, it's a really good value across the board. I think we've seen this M1-Chip do some pretty impressive things as far as the CPU benchmark results that we've tested. A couple real-world applications, which gets into a tricky area. You can speak more about the emulation in a moment. But yeah, there's certain things that we are able to test and be definitive about, and there's certain things that we have to give you a grain of salt about when we're testing, because not everything is built at this point natively to run on the M1 chip. So there's a bit of a give and take going on right now.
Yeah, basically the M1, it from the very name, it suggests that it is the first one. And with the first of anything, there are going to be teething problems. We do know that not all software can run natively on the M1 chip. This is not a new situation. It's not unique to Apple. This has happened many times before in the computing world. But Apple seems to be doing a pretty good job of it, where basically any software will run, assuming that it's a 64-bit application. But unless the developer has made a special version for the Apple Silicon, which is the M1-Chip, it won't run natively. It will run in emulation, which can slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
So most apps that you might commonly use, like the Safari web browser, the various parts of the operating system that are made by Apple, that all runs silky smooth and natively. But common applications like Adobe Photoshop, Microsoft Office, they will run in emulation. And I did see, at least in my experience, that they are a little bit slower. But it's nothing like we've seen before from the switch from Intel-powered Windows laptops to ARM-powered Windows laptops. It really is. It's very not that detectable.
Right. Yeah. We could assume, and we've also seen in testing some lost efficiency happening once you go through the emulation layer. That's not really the ideal scenario for the M1 to be running. Over time, more and more of these programs will be rebuilt to natively run on the M1. We've already seen a couple start to trickle through. These are huge programs, like you said, Adobe software and Microsoft Office, things that are going to get ported correctly.
Yeah, if you've been using Macs for a long time and remember the PowerPC to Intel transition, it didn't take that long. There were universal versions of apps relatively quickly. Adobe is definitely working on the Creative Suite. Microsoft is definitely working on Office. And, at this point it's very early, but probably in a year or so we'll see everything run natively.
So yeah, that was as annoying as it was for us as reviewers, as it will be for more annoying for us as reviewers than it will be for most consumers in the long run. There will probably be a 6-month to year period where stuff will transition and be a little awkward and it's running on emulation. But long term, especially by the time the theoretical M2 rolls around, most of these programs will have been built to run natively on this chip.
But it's funny you mentioned that theoretical M2, because the M1 performance theoretically is so good. It is when you look at native benchmarks, it is basically what it's what Intel and AMD kind of have been striving towards for the past several processor generations. It's already there theoretically in the M1. The single core and multi-core performance is excellent. Graphics performance is decent for integrated graphics. Which is kind of where the industry's been headed. It's all there in the M1. It's just right now you might not be able to take advantage of it in the most efficient way.
Yeah, the bottom line is, yes, grain of salt on some of the things. There's some emulation happening. Not everything runs natively, but even then, even through emulation, we saw roughly at worst, it runs about equivalent to Intel's latest chips in equivalent Windows laptops. So even through emulation, even with a little bit of things not being optimized as well as they're going to be in the long run, like at worst, it's running as well as Intel solutions. And Apple, they've been working on their mobile processors and stuff. So I don't want to say first try entirely like cold turkey, but they have kind of in one attempt at a laptop chip at least matched what Intel has been doing. And I mean, that's not great news for Intel necessarily, but for Apple moving forward, being able to control on the chip level and on the operating system level and on the hardware level, it's all working really well, which is really good news for Apple.
Yeah, but I think it's really good news for people who were looking at buying a MacBook Air, because you're not really giving up, like we said before, you're now, if you're looking at the MacBook Air, you're getting almost all the performance that you can in the MacBook Pro and really the Mac Mini as well in a cheaper package, and a thinner and lighter package too. I mean, it's the MacBook Air. It's the lightest laptop. So it's great news for Apple in terms of their forward-looking plans to get rid of Intel. But I think that in this case, it's not just, oh, how can we sell more Macs? It's like the people who are right now looking for a new laptop to work from home or to give to their kids to do schooling from home. Those are actually the people that are going to benefit the most, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, rising tide will lift all boats as far as all of Apple's products are concerned. But the MacBook Air is probably the single biggest winner here, becoming really just a really good value. There's no other way to put it. It got almost 30 hours on our battery test. It was efficient at everything that the MacBook Pro was efficient at. across the board good performance. Graphics, as you mentioned, not groundbreaking, not incredible, but 30 frames per second gaming on some actual AAA games, a couple older titles, not super cutting edge stuff, but playable mainstream games at low to medium settings. That's not nothing. That's sort of where Intel's been pushing with the Iris Xe and Iris Xe Max. It's roughly in that same ballpark. So, I mean, if it's matching that again on its sort of first attempt, and Intel's been really praising and building up its integrated graphics push. The fact that the M1 out of the gate also matches that on the graphics side is another encouraging thing. So all around, we really like the MacBook Air. Of the two, that's probably one we'd recommend more. The Mac Mini, neither of us reviewed it ourselves, but it is a good product that also uses the M1. You can talk a little bit about the Mac Mini for those interested.
Yeah, so basically the Mac Mini is similar to the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air, mostly unchanged other than the addition of the M1 processor. But there are a few physical changes. There are now fewer Thunderbolt ports, which is a negative for people who have lots of Thunderbolt peripherals. But you know, it's 2020. Thunderbolt has been around for a while. USB-C has been around for a while. You can buy an adapter or a hub if you need more ports. And as a result of the switch to the M1-Chip, you can no longer upgrade the memory or the storage or any other components of the Mac Mini. It's all part of the same processor. It's all in the compute unit. No upgrades are possible. But that said, what other options are there if you want a tiny, powerful desktop? There are not a ton.
No.
So
especially if you're a Mac OS user, that is
right. So I think you could make a Hackintosh. You could do any type of thing like that. But really, the Mac Mini is kind of in a class by itself, and the M1 is kind of gravy there. It was already kind of on its own. Yeah. So I think you mentioned the ports too. That's maybe the one downside of the Air. Still 2 USB-C ports, and that's it. That's all you get. But yeah, here's the thing, right? So there's only 2 USB-C. So as great as the new laptops and the Mac Mini are, we should note that there are a few things that Apple has continued to make that are kind of annoying to a lot of people. One is there aren't that many ports. It's not as bad a problem as it used to be because none of the other ultra portable laptops have that many ports now either. They've all taken them off. The XPS 13, one of our favorite Windows laptops, also only has 2 USB ports. But we should note that, yes, these new laptops and Mac Mini are more powerful, but they don't get any extra ports, and they don't get a touchscreen, which is something that I still struggle to understand why Apple, which has this amazing touch-capable operating system that is on many of their products, will not put it into the Mac. Ultimately, there aren't a lot of customization options. You can't get your memory options are limited to 16 gigabytes with the M1 powered chip, and the storage amounts are also relatively stingy. We're talking about 256 gigabytes of storage for a $1,300 MacBook Pro, which is a little stingy in the Windows world, and it costs, the cost for additional storage can go up. So there are definite downsides to this that Apple hasn't addressed that we hope that they will, maybe in the next version. But overall, all 3 of these products are definitely improved, and they were already very good.
Right, and 256 gigs, the same amount of storage that's in the MacBook Air base model anyway for $1,000. Another case that the Air is superior value to the Pro.
So basically, just skip to this point in the video, and if you need a new laptop, buy the MacBook Air. Done.
Pretty much, yeah. The lack of touchscreen, I do agree. It's a bit odd. It seems almost a philosophical point that they will not be adding that anytime soon.
Right.
Certainly.
Right.
There's so many synergies between the iPad, the iPhone, and the MacBooks, and touch remains not to be one of them. Other than the touch bar, that is the only way you can poke at your MacBook and have it do something. So yeah, I mean, maybe in the future they will change their mind. I don't exactly know what the guiding philosophy is there between that. Not every Windows user needs a touchscreen either. You'll be perfectly happy with your MacBook Air, but it does allow you to do things like rotate it into tablet mode. It opens up new possibilities. Sometimes you just feel like poking at the screen instead of using your touchpad.
See, that's me. Whenever I'm using Mac, I feel like poking at the screen, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, one day. Keep buying MacBook Airs and see if the next one lets you touch the screen and have it do something. But yeah, that's really the bottom line here. The M1 looks fantastic. It's a really great start. We'll see more definitively, I think, be able to claim its performance levels as more programs are written natively to support it. And we will be able to test a wider range of things and have a really comprehensive takeaway about its performance for you going down the line. The real takeaway here is that it's good. It's quite good in some circumstances. It's a really nice development for Apple. As a whole, we think the MacBook Air is probably the one to pick. If you love your Touch Bar and you love the concept of the MacBook Pro more and you have a little bit of a higher budget, the MacBook Pro is also good. Desktop users looking for a space-saving alternative, go for the Mac Mini. Please read our full reviews on PCMag.com. There are many more details, benchmark results, more than you could count. So please go check those out and read our hard-written words. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time.